There's something unnervingly silent about snowstorms. The world becomes muted, the sound swallowed by the wind's relentless howl. For Marcus and his friends, what began as a weekend ski trip to the remote mountains turned into a desperate fight for survival. And as the snow piled higher, so did the unsettling truths about the lodge they sought refuge in. The trip had been Marcus's idea. He and 3 friends, Lisa, Eric, and Dana, needed a break from their exhausting work schedules. A few days in the mountains sounded perfect. Skiing during the day, cozying up by the fire at night, and a much-needed disconnect from the digital world. They rented a cabin through a site that boasted unspoiled nature and rustic charm. The drive up had been uneventful until the snow began to fall. At first, it was beautiful. Big, fluffy flakes drifted lazily down, creating a picturesque winter wonderland. But as they climbed higher into the mountains, the snowfall intensified. The once clear roads disappeared under a thick blanket of white, and visibility dropped to near zero. "We should turn back," Lisa said from the passenger seat, her voice tight with worry. "We're almost there," Marcus reassured her. He'd checked the weather before they left. The forecast had mentioned light snow, but nothing like this. Suddenly, a loud thud shook the car as the tires hit something unseen. Marcus slammed on the brakes, and the car skidded to a stop. Everyone's breath was visible in the freezing air as they exchanged uneasy glances. "What was that?" Eric asked, peering into the swirling snow. Marcus grabbed a flashlight and stepped out, the icy wind cutting through his jacket. He shone the beam ahead and froze. Just a few feet in front of the car was a tree, its thick trunk fallen across the road. They were blocked in with no way forward. "We're stuck," Marcus said when he got back inside. "What about turning around?" Dana suggested. "The last turnoff was miles back," Marcus replied. "We'll have to find somewhere to wait this out." Lisa pointed to a faint light glowing through the snow-covered trees. "Over there. Maybe someone can help." They abandoned the car and trudged toward the light, the snow up to their knees. The wind howled, and every step felt like a battle. When they finally reached the source, they saw it was a large old lodge. The wooden structure looked as though it had been there for centuries, its windows frosted over and roof weighed down with snow. Inside, the lodge was surprisingly warm. A roaring fire crackled in the massive stone fireplace, and the scent of burning wood filled the air. An elderly woman appeared from a back room, her movements slow but deliberate. She wore a thick sweater and had a knitted shawl draped over her shoulders. "Oh my, what are you doing out in this weather?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. Marcus explained their situation, and the woman nodded. "You're welcome to stay until the storm passes," she said. "My name is Margaret. I run this place, though it doesn't see many visitors anymore." The group thanked her and settled in, shedding their soaked coats and boots near the fire. Margaret brought out blankets and steaming mugs of tea, insisting they warm up. But as they sat in the cozy living room, Dana noticed something odd. The walls were covered in old photographs, all depicting groups of people, families, couples, friends. Some were posed stiffly, while others showed candid moments of laughter. Yet, something about the faces felt off. The eyes seemed too wide, the smiles too strained. "These are interesting," Dana said, pointing to the photos. Margaret's expression tightened. "Memories of past guests," she said simply before changing the subject. "Dinner will be ready soon." Lisa leaned into Dana. "Is it just me, or do those pictures give you the creeps?" she whispered. "It's not just you," Dana replied. Later, as they sat down to eat, Marcus noticed Margaret's hands were trembling as she poured the tea. "Are you all right?" he asked. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just tired," she said. But as the meal went on, the group began to notice subtle sounds. Faint footsteps upstairs, the creak of a door opening, and what sounded like a whisper. Each time they asked Margaret about it, she dismissed their concerns with a reassuring smile. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. The storm raged outside, but it wasn't the wind that kept him awake. It was a feeling, a heavy, oppressive sensation that something wasn't right. Unable to ignore it, he got up to explore. The lodge was eerily quiet, the only sound the creak of the floorboards beneath his feet. As he wandered the halls, he noticed a door at the end of a corridor that seemed out of place. Unlike the other doors, this one was made of metal and had a large padlock securing it. Marcus's curiosity got the better of him. He searched the lodge until he found a set of old keys in a drawer near the front desk. One of them fit the padlock, and with a heavy click, it came undone. The door opened to reveal a steep staircase leading down into darkness. Marcus hesitated, every instinct telling him to turn back. But he descended, flashlight in hand. The air grew colder with each step, and a faint smell of damp earth filled his nostrils. At the bottom was a small, windowless room. The walls were lined with shelves holding jars of strange, preserved objects, bones, feathers, and what looked like dried herbs. In the center of the room was a table, and on it lay a large, leather-bound book. Its cover was etched with symbols Marcus didn't recognize. As he flipped through the pages, he realized it was a ledger. Each page detailed the arrival and departure of guests, but the entries stopped abruptly 50 years ago. The last page held a single sentence scrawled in red ink. They never leave. When Marcus returned upstairs, he found the others awake, their faces pale with fear. Lisa had heard someone whispering her name through the walls, and Eric swore he'd seen a figure standing at the edge of the forest, watching the lodge. "We need to leave," Marcus said, showing them the book. "Now!" But when they tried to gather their things, Margaret appeared, blocking the door. Her demeanor had changed entirely. Gone was the gentle, kind woman who had offered them shelter. Her eyes were cold, and her voice was sharp. "You can't leave," she said. "Not yet." Before they could react, the power went out, plunging the lodge into darkness. Panic set in as the group stumbled through the halls, trying to find another way out. But every door they tried was locked, and the windows wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, coming from all around them. Shadows moved in the corners of their vision, and the photographs on the walls seemed to change, their subjects now staring directly at them. The group became separated in the chaos. Marcus found himself back in the hidden room. The book opened to a new page. It now read, "For more to join the others." The story ends with Marcus screaming as the door slammed shut behind him, leaving his fate and that of his friends unknown. In the unforgiving wilderness of the Arctic Circle, survival is a game of wits and endurance. But for Dr. Elena Foster and her research team, their isolated expedition became more than a struggle against the elements. As the sun vanished for months and the ice grew thicker, they discovered something buried beneath the frost, something that should have remained hidden. The plane touched down on the icy runway with a jarring thud. Through the small window, Dr. Elena Foster could see nothing but an endless expanse of white, broken only by the distant silhouette of Camp Borealis. It was a modest research station, four prefabricated buildings huddled together against the relentless cold. "Welcome to the middle of nowhere," quipped Adam, the team's geologist, as they disembarked. The cold hit like a slap, and even their thermal suits offered little comfort. Elena's team consisted of 5 specialists: Adam, Naomi the climatologist, Victor the logistics expert, Jamie the technician, and herself, a paleoecologist. Their mission was to study ancient ice cores and gather data on prehistoric climate patterns. The location, chosen for its untouched ice shelves, was perfect for their work. But its remoteness also meant they were entirely on their own. The camp itself was functional but Spartan. The largest building housed their equipment and workstations, while the others served as living quarters, a mess hall, and storage. As they unpacked, Elena felt the first twinge of unease. It wasn't the cold or isolation, it was the silence. Out here, even the wind seemed muted, as if the landscape were holding its breath. By evening, the team had settled in, and spirits were high. Over dinner, they laughed and shared stories, the warmth of camaraderie pushing back the Arctic chill. But later, as Elena lay in her bunk, she thought she heard something outside, a faint, rhythmic tapping. She dismissed it as the wind against the building and fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, the team began drilling into the ice shelf. The work was grueling but rewarding as they extracted core samples containing millennia-old secrets. On the second day, however, the drill hit something unexpected. "It's not ice," Adam said, frowning as he examined the core sample. The drill had brought up shards of a metallic substance, dull gray but unnaturally smooth. Naomi suggested it could be a meteorite fragment, but its composition didn't match any known material. Curiosity overtook caution as the team widened the drilling site. After hours of work, they uncovered what appeared to be a structure buried deep within the ice. The smooth, angular walls hinted at something engineered rather than natural. Excitement rippled through the team, but Elena felt a growing sense of dread. By the third day, they had unearthed a small entrance, sealed with a thick, frozen door. It took Jamie hours to cut through the ice, encasing it. When the door finally swung open, a gust of stale, frigid air escaped. Inside was a dark corridor leading down into the ice. "We shouldn't go in," Elena said, her voice trembling. But the others were too intrigued to listen. They rationalized it as part of their research, a discovery that could make their careers. Reluctantly, Elena followed them into the icy depths. The corridor led to a cavernous chamber, its walls inscribed with strange symbols that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. In the center stood a large, circular object resembling a frozen mirror. It emitted a faint, unnatural hum that vibrated in their bones. That night, the aurora borealis danced across the sky, its ethereal colors reflected on the endless ice. The team celebrated their discovery, but Elena couldn't shake her unease. The object, whatever it was, felt wrong, as if it didn't belong in this world. Later, as the others slept, Elena found herself drawn back to the chamber. She wasn't alone. Jamie was there, staring at the circular object. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Jamie said, his voice distant. Elena stepped closer, and the hum grew louder. She noticed frost forming on Jamie's face, but he didn't seem to feel the cold. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the chamber was plunged into darkness. Elena's flashlight wouldn't turn on, and the hum grew deafening. When the lights returned, Jamie was gone. The circular object was glowing now, faint ripples spreading across its surface like water. Elena screamed for help, and the others came running. But there was no trace of Jamie, only his abandoned gear. Panic spread through the team. Victor wanted to call for an evacuation, but the storm outside had worsened, making communication and travel impossible. They were trapped. Over the next few days, things unraveled. The object's hum became a constant presence, resonating through the entire camp. Naomi began hearing whispers in her sleep, and Adam complained of vivid nightmares. The symbols on the cavern walls seemed to grow brighter, pulsating in time with the hum. One night, Victor vanished. The remaining team searched frantically, but found only his jacket near the chamber entrance. The others wanted to destroy the object, but when they tried to approach it, they were overwhelmed by an inexplicable fear that froze them in place. Elena kept meticulous notes, desperate to understand what was happening. She theorized that the object emitted a field affecting their minds, preying on their deepest fears and weaknesses. But without Jamie or Victor, their chances of survival dwindled. On the seventh night, Naomi succumbed. She walked into the chamber and pressed her hand against the object. Elena and Adam watched in horror as she was pulled into the rippling surface, her body dissolving into light. Adam snapped, blaming Elena for not stopping the excavation sooner. They argued, their voices echoing through the camp. In his rage, Adam tried to destroy the object with a blowtorch, but the flame ricocheted off an invisible barrier, engulfing him instead. Now alone, Elena documented everything. She planned to flee once the storm cleared, leaving behind the cursed camp and its horrifying discovery. But the object's pull grew stronger, and she began to hear her name in the whispers. The final entry in her journal read, "It's calling me. I don't want to go, but I can't resist anymore. If anyone finds this, don't follow. Destroy this place, and forget it ever existed." Frost Peak Asylum had been abandoned for decades. left to the mercy of the unforgiving winter storms that buried it under layers of snow each year. Yet its sinister reputation endured. When a group of urban explorers ventured into its icy depths, seeking thrills and forbidden stories, they uncovered a chilling secret, one that refused to remain buried. The journey to Frost Peak Asylum was treacherous. The group, Ben, a thrill seeker with a camera, Alex, his cautious but curious best friend, Mia, a paranormal enthusiast, and Rachel, a skeptic who came for the adventure, hiked for hours through waist-deep snow. The abandoned asylum loomed ahead, its dark silhouette cutting against the white horizon. "Are we sure about this?" Alex asked, his voice muffled by the scarf wrapped around his face. "We didn't come all this way to chicken out now," Ben replied, pulling his drone out to capture aerial footage of the asylum. "It's just an old building," Rachel said with a shrug. "Creepy? Sure. But ghosts? I'll believe it when I see it." Mia, clutching a worn notebook filled with local legends, pointed to the second floor. "That's where they kept the special patients. They say you can still hear their screams on quiet nights." Rachel rolled her eyes, but Ben's camera was already trained on the building. The main entrance had long since collapsed, so they climbed through a broken window. Inside, the air was colder than outside, as if the building itself exhaled frost. Graffiti covered the peeling walls, and the floor was littered with broken glass and debris. As they ventured deeper, the group's laughter faded, replaced by uneasy silence. The asylum's oppressive atmosphere seemed to press down on them, and their breath clouded in the frigid air. When they reached the central hall, Mia stopped abruptly, shining her flashlight on a faded plaque that read, "Frost Peak Asylum, IST 1912. They closed this place after the avalanche in '66, Mia whispered. Dozens of patients and staff were trapped inside. They say some of them never made it out. The group split up to explore, despite Alex's protests. Ben and Rachel headed toward the basement, while Alex and Mia took the upper floors. The second floor was lined with rusted gurneys and shattered windows. Mia's flashlight flickered as they passed a series of locked doors, each with a small, grated window. "This is where the special patients were," Mia said, her voice low. Alex peered into one of the rooms. The walls were covered in scratches, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. "Let's keep moving," Alex urged, but Mia lingered. She placed her notebook on a gurney to adjust her camera, and a sudden gust of wind swept through the corridor, flipping its pages. "Did you feel that?" she asked. Before Alex could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed behind them. They spun around, but the corridor was empty. Then came the whisper, faint and chilling, as if spoken directly into their ears. "Get out!" Alex grabbed Mia's arm. "We're leaving. Now!" Meanwhile, in the basement, Ben and Rachel found the morgue. The smell of decay lingered despite the years, and the metal slabs were covered in frost. Ben filmed everything, narrating in a voice that tried to mask his nerves. "This is where they brought the bodies after the avalanche," he said. "Some say they never left." As Rachel examined the far corner of the room, Ben noticed his breath fogging unnaturally, as if the temperature had dropped even further. The camera's screen flickered, and for a split second, he thought he saw a figure standing behind Rachel. "Rachel, move," he said urgently. She turned, but there was nothing there. "What is it?" I thought I saw something," Ben stammered. The lights in the basement flickered, and the sound of metal scraping against metal filled the room. The slabs began to slide out on their own, as if something was trying to crawl out. The group reconvened in the central hall, their faces pale and their nerves frayed. Ben showed them the footage from his camera, but the figure he'd seen was gone. "It's like the place is messing with us," Alex said. "I'm telling you, we need to leave," Mia said. "Whatever's here, it doesn't want us here." But Ben was adamant about staying. "We've come this far. One more hour, and we'll have enough footage to make this worth it." Reluctantly, the others agreed. They decided to explore the third floor together. But as they climbed the stairs, the air grew heavy. The walls seemed to close in, and the sound of their footsteps echoed unnaturally. On the third floor, they found the remains of what had once been a common area. Chairs were overturned, and faded murals of idyllic landscapes adorned the peeling walls. In the center of the room was a large, broken mirror. "Look at this," Mia said, pointing to the shards. Each reflected their surroundings, but when Rachel looked closer, she realized something was wrong. In the reflection, she saw a fifth figure standing among them. "Who's that?" Rachel whispered, her voice shaking. The others turned, but the room was empty. When they looked back at the mirror, the figure was gone. Suddenly, the doors slammed shut, trapping them inside. The temperature plummeted, and the walls began to reverberate with whispers. The voices grew louder, overlapping until they became an unbearable roar. The group huddled together, their flashlights flickering as shadows moved across the walls. Then, just as quickly as it started, the noise stopped. The doors creaked open, and the group bolted, abandoning their equipment in their desperation to escape. But as they descended the stairs, the asylum seemed to shift around them. Corridors they had passed earlier now led to dead ends, and the exit seemed impossibly far away. By the time they found the exit, Rachel was missing. The remaining three called out for her, but their voices were swallowed by the asylum's oppressive silence. "We can't leave her," Alex said, his voice breaking. "If we go back in, we'll all die," Mia argued. Ben hesitated, torn between his guilt and his fear. But before they could decide, the doors slammed shut behind them, locking them out in the freezing cold. Inside, Rachel wandered the dark halls, her flashlight barely holding a charge. She thought she could hear her friends calling her name, but the voices came from all directions. She stumbled into the basement, where the frost-covered slabs now lay empty. The scratching sound began again, and as she turned, she saw them. The patients, their hollow eyes glowing faintly, their mouths twisted into silent screams. Rachel screamed, but the sound was lost in the storm outside. The others, now miles away, would never know what had happened to her.